Hi everyone, very excited to be here to share a little about my take on the future of education. I believe that education, when we talk about its future, will involve only more students and teachers creating their digital products beyond being just passive consumers of it. Much like how Web3 revolutions favor creators as well as decentralization, I believe that education will similarly undergo a very fundamental paradigm shift of ceding autonomy. This one word, decentralization. As uncomfortable as it may be to existing educational authorities, we will cede autonomy to more and more students as part of the knowledge acquisition as well as the knowledge creation process. And teachers themselves will find themselves becoming students once more as part of this process. And this revolution is going to be a lot more dramatic and profound than just being forced to learn video conferencing tools like what COVID has accelerated today. We know the tools keep changing, just like you saw on the first slide, and it will only get a little harder to keep up if we choose to ignore these trends. In my lifetime, there were some very memorable changes that made my lived experiences really confusing. The disappearance of the payphone. I guess my students will never understand the Maroon 5 song. The disappearance of the CD player or Walkman. The disappearance of the floppy disk, cassette players, MSN messengers, and Yahoo groups, which is something that my council groups used to do. I don't think many of my students today will catch the same references or feel the same nostalgia when I talk about these things. But essentially, I think the bottom line is this: disruptive technologies are always reshaping the world, the way we interact with the world. And a simple example that we all could probably relate to that explains a very big generation gap is that children today really just live with social media as part of their childhood. Our definition of play as adults look very different within the span of less than a decade. And this is what I often think about when I look at students who are just 12 years younger than me, or 10 years when I first started teaching. So this is the way we listen to music, consume media, and keep up with social networks are fundamentally different from the past. The way we learn today will also look drastically different. We are anticipating an age of more and more creators as the barriers to entry for making digital products only continues to fall with time. Creating things increasingly will require less technical training, and the golden question for me has always been, what's my role in all this? How do I prepare students for such a rapidly changing future? So before I started teaching, I read this book, Why Do I Need a Teacher When I Have Google? And my own take, independent of Gilbert's text and its own responses, is really to encourage curiosity and encourage students to create, because there's profound satisfaction in this that we can't just get when we read information and process it passively. And to me, this really cannot be divorced from low code, no code. So what exactly is no code, low code? What's exactly what sounds like being able to create digital products with minimal code? To appreciate this, I would like to share a little more about my own digital skills journey. So it involved a couple of things: reading random Medium articles and copying their code, right? Snippets on, GitHub share, going on Stack Overflow and copying code again. Just enrolling a bunch of courses that I never quite completed on Udemy, auditing Coursera courses because I was too much of a miser to pay, as well as just watching YouTube, finishing some, but mostly failing to complete things like 6 hours tutorial on OpenCV or how to create your portfolio site using React. Eventually, a bit more structure came when I asked my friends to work at a startup, Stuff Any. They're basically a workforce management software as a service startup focused on F&B and hourly workers during my time when I was very bored in teaching school. There, I realized some gaps in knowledge couldn't be patched by just trying to run into the wall, so I eventually committed to a full stack coding bootcamp with Nolowcode. Now, without technical programming education, like a 4-year CS degree, it was very expensive, time-consuming, but still very, very eye-opening to be able to build my first digital products. And coding fundamentally helped me to understand and be super excited about what can be done. When previously everything seemed manual, there are ways to find more efficient opportunities to make everyone's lives a little better. So when I asked the CTO of Stuff Any, Jeremy, who happened to be a schoolmate too, just I didn't realize, how do I know whether a software engineering path is for me back in 2018? He told me something along the lines of, you will find great joy at seeing a product come to life. But at the same time, as I went through all this pain, I realized that coding isn't quite for everyone, at least not immediately. It was demoralizing to fix bugs and many tickets. It is very sad to watch Webpacker crash or run database migrations only to see it fail, or even to think about CRUD, right? But the bigger question to me is then, how do we get people excited to want to be committed to build? At least for me, probably starting with for loops or technical architecture diagrams may not be the best way to draw in a new learner. And personally, I thought being able to deploy something on the web for the first time was intensely memorable. My friends on Staff Any remind me that the sign-in page that I was allowed to build, with immense guidance, of course, is still in operation after a couple of years. It may not be much, but 4 years on, seeing something that I used to build continue to remain live alongside of other Telegram integrations, that was profoundly satisfying. It was my first touch with deploying CSS for an actual product. So CSS is cascading style sheets. For those who are not familiar, it's a language style web pages, so it looks less ugly. Touching Bootstrap, containers, and really coding in React, it was honestly really painful as a noob, but ultimately seeing it live just was so transformative. Low-code, no-code subverts this by allowing newbies to create things that used to be really technical, that only was possible after years and years of training. And it allows for designers to deploy sites without having to back programmers. It allows users with little design sense to create beautiful products through software like Canva. It allows my students to build their own portfolio pages and deploy in minutes on stuff like Card with 2 Rs. And it allows me to build my own LMS or learning management system without relying on clunky apps like Blackboard or Canvas. Not throwing shade there. To me, low-code, no-code has been like magic to ease new learners into the world of tech and empower all of them, right? To improve user experiences for people around them. So beyond recent training, as you might see in this odd image on screen, my belief in low-code, no-code actually is derived largely from my own lived experiences from way back. Just like many of you who might be the audience, this was when I was a high school student and even before. This story goes back to first when I was 7, then jumps back to I was 17, to when I was 17, your age probably. When I was 7, I remember helping to drop off paper flyers into mailboxes like you see on screen. Vaguely illegal, I know. Before the age of digital marketing, flyers were king. But it was pretty inefficient. It took time to go block to block. You would never really know whether people read it or get engaged. So my brother first built my dad's portfolio, rather his business site, using his HTML skills we learned from our high school Raffles institution. When I was 17, later, we then start to write on the digital wave, building pages on Facebook business pages, as well as Google My Business profiles. This helped to put his business, a relatively unknown bicycle shop teaching people how to cycle, on the map. Google Maps, of course, and putting it on the internet. So now, even as an adult with little technical education beyond the bootcamp, using Calendly as well as other automated email workflows to direct traffic to social media channels and Google My Business profile, we have helped to get about 30,000 organic views, which is more than enough for small and medium enterprise in Singapore. My dad worked hard, of course, but no code helped to cement distribution of his business and sparing you the boring details of other data pipelines. I try to do the same for my mother, and I see immense potential in students doing the same. Growing up with businesses was a really interesting experience and provided me with an authentic sandbox to see how low-code, no-code tools can be so transformative in the real world. I later scaled the same philosophy of digital skills education through a startup called CareerContact, working on it on a pro bono basis through the lockdown, and allowed Singaporean students, Thai students, and Filipino students to experience the same workflows as I did as a child. This is ultimately TEDxRI, right? So it's only apt to close this with a few Raffles-related stories of low-code, no-code. I had the joy of teaching a database tool to nest all the questions and corresponding examiners' reports. Yes, Raffles students is the ridiculously thick one that runs for hundreds of pages for prelims. On aggregate, if you consider a couple of 100-page pages per batch per report. It's easily tens and thousands of pages to sift through whenever we need to reference past material. Our pain point as a department, was a fewfold. One, we really don't want to carry that hard copy 10-year series, nor its associated examiners reports around. It's just too thick and heavy to find. Our files also nested across many folders on MS SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint, which is kind of like Google Drive, right? And it's extremely hard to access on demand. So to me, the solution was to build a dashboard, a searchable database, essentially. It can be done on Excel for sure, the OG low-code, no-code tool. But as we know, Excel formulas can be clunky, very difficult to maintain, especially without documentation, and kind of difficult for non-technical users. So I pitched Notion to my boss, built an MVP or minimum viable product in a couple of days, and shared how even non-technical filters could create their own filters, create new views in seconds, when this would otherwise take a fairly technical or power Excel user. That's what they call it, I guess. While there are security concerns that are ultimately addressed by the current setup, basically still retaining authentication and security back at Raffles, I think the main takeaway is that simple builds, right? Simple builds can be done by anyone. There are a lot of tools. There will be more, but sifting through the noise only can go so far if you just read, but we all need to get our hands dirty. Honestly, 6 in 10 ideas I pitched has failed. It took nearly 2 years to get a program up and running, but low-code, no-code has really reduced the cost of failure. You have spent time. You don't have to spend ages building a front end for anything, right? Because there's so many tools for you to do so right now. For my own students who learn economics with me on Notion, I hope this empowers you with a tool rather than a random learning management system that you're forced to use and you'll forget as you age. Some of you shared you continue to use Notion as well as some other software that I've introduced in your own use cases for note-taking, and I sincerely hope that your curiosity and learning will take you far. After trying for a while, I'd like to think that I'm in a reasonably good position with a fair handle of the future. I hope more and more students and teachers will join me in this low-code, no-code journey, and who knows, you may be hooked. It is daunting, as you can see on screen, but satisfying. Maybe you'll commit to becoming more technical, like myself. But ultimately, as you keep learning these tools, you too will become a creator and become part of the process in solving problems, even without years of technical training. And as you learn, I think the world sincerely will become a better place. I find immense satisfaction in building, and I think low-code, no-code enables that. I hope one day I can contribute also to your own journey as you also find the same spirit and enjoyment in building something of your own. Thank you so much for your time.